Well, the suspect in last night's shooting has been identified as 31-year-old Cole Allen. According to reports, he traveled across the country from Southern California to that dinner to target Trump administration officials.
Bloomberg's Jeff Mason is back with us, along with Elliot Williams. He's a CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor. He's also the author of a new book, 5 Bullets, chronicling one of New York City's most infamous shooting. Thank you guys both so much for joining us. Elliot, I want to ask you, at the moment, this individual, as far as we know, is only charged with gun-related charges. Are we expecting that will be upgraded as the facts become clear? How does this work?
I would think it would be upgraded if more facts come out that give a sense as to why the shooting took place. Now, if you notice, the 2 crimes, Christina, that they've identified really are quite specific to just simply having a firearm, assaulting a federal officer,
right.
Someone goes after an officer, but also using a firearm in the commission of a crime of violence. Those are 2 things that are obvious to anybody that's on the video right now. No one knows if he attempted to kill the president legally. No one knows who he went there to kill or assault. And until you know that information, you can't really charge him with those things. There are federal crimes for attempting to kill a president of the United States, a vice president, a member of Congress. None of that has come out yet.
Give us some sense of what's happening at this point in time. So we heard from Kash Patel, the head of the FBI. We heard from the acting attorney general last night as well, talking a bit about the contours of this investigation. What's happening behind the scenes, and what is that interface like between Main Justice,
right.
U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro's office, and the FBI as well?
Right. Certainly the FBI would be leading any investigation here because, and the Secret Service too, for a few reasons. FBI handles general violent crime at a federal level, but also acts of terrorism. And if there is some terrorist nexus, that would make it squarely within the FBI's purview. So they're looking into that. I think the FBI is gathering the kinds of things that I was talking about here, which would be, why did this person commit this thing? Now, you can get that just from searching his person. Is there a manifesto somewhere? What does he say in his emails? What is the record of his staying at that hotel, getting to the hotel? What can they piece together about why he was there? It's very easy, particularly in a morning like this where feelings are raw, for people to think, oh, this person must have gone to try to kill the president of the United States or commit a terrorist act. And it seems obvious, right? We saw on the television, and I think that's a natural conclusion. But prosecutors can only charge what they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And right now, at least based on what I'm reading in the newspapers and seeing on the television, it's a person with a gun at a big event
where the president
was, but that discharged his weapon perhaps in a violent manner. Or in a violent manner, of course. Right.
What is the legal threshold to upgrade those charges? What are they looking for?
Yeah, it's not a question of even upgrading them. It's the same standard every time.
Adding to?
Yeah, or just adding new charges. It would be, do you have probable cause to believe that this crime was committed? Probable cause being it's more likely than not. So do they have evidence to suggest that there's a decent chance that any of these things happen? Now, that's just the threshold for charging. Convicting him is beyond a reasonable doubt. We've all heard that in cop shows through our whole lives. And are they convinced? And prosecutors can't and shouldn't, frankly, even with respect to their law licenses, can't bring charges that they don't believe they can win beyond a reasonable doubt. So, yes, I think we think of prosecutors as just, I was going to say shooting into the air. That's maybe not the right metaphor to use here. But you think of prosecutors as blindly going after charges simply because to go after someone. No, they have to really be convinced and confident that they can win if they bring this to trial.
Jeff, let's talk a bit about the tableau that we saw last night, which was so striking. That was the White House briefing room full of reporters in tuxedos and evening gowns, the president wearing a tuxedo as well. And as I mentioned, you had Todd Blanche there with Kash Patel. What stood out to you from their remarks as they talked about what had happened in the investigation? Kash Patel talking a lot about the success of law enforcement at this moment and them being emboldened or helped or encouraged by what the president has done. What stood out to you from the comments that they made, those law enforcement officials made during their comments last night?
A handful of things. Number one, it was all staged, and that is, it was staged in real time. That's not a criticism, but that's very Trumpian. The president leaving the ballroom and then going straight to the White House and holding a press conference. And he talked
with many cabinet members present.
And his wife.
Yes.
Also unusual. And he answered reporters' questions. He talked about his feelings in the moment, but he also, as I referred to in the previous block, brought in a little bit of politics, brought in this sort of push for the new ballroom, which I can tell you, as a former White House Correspondents Association president, we wouldn't be planning an event in the White House ballroom unless that was directed perhaps by the Secret Service. So I understand that he's been making that case for the ballroom, which is caught up in the legal system right now for state dinners. But it was a first to hear him make an argument that you needed the ballroom for an event planned by an outside organization. But to your broader question, you also heard Kash Patel, as he often does, begin his opening remarks when he was given the podium last night praising President Trump. So lots of little pieces of politics and praise for the president who may or may not have been facing a third assassination attempt.
Elliot, what's your take on that? Should the Secret Service be able to secure an external ballroom, or does the president need to retreat behind those gates on Pennsylvania Avenue?
Oh, my goodness. There are such long-standing procedures with respect to how to secure a space. I think one of the issues that they confronted here is the fact that this event, and this is touching on what Jeff was talking about a little bit, this event takes place in a hotel with residents that have nothing to do with this event, and to some extent people have a right, or at least ought to have the ability to come and go from the place they're staying. That said, the President of the United States gets 24-hour Secret Service protection, and as we see from events like this, sometimes that breaks down, at least to us as lay people out in the public. There has to be a balance somehow where we secure the president and the people around him and the people who are entitled to legal protection under the law, but also that Americans can go about and live their lives freely. And I think that's what they run into having this event in a regular hotel that's open to the streets. You can just walk in.
Yeah, and it has, as I was saying before, it has the biggest ballroom in Washington, D.C., and a ballroom in an area that has been a historically very safe place for presidents and leaders. This is also where the National Prayer Breakfast is held every year. Right. I have to assume after last night that there are going to be lots and lots of questions about that hotel specifically and the security protocols for holding events, not just like the White House Correspondents Association last night that we were at, but also other events like the prayer breakfast and other things.
But just quickly, as a matter of common sense, again, none of us are Secret Service agents here. I've done law enforcement for much of my career, but as a matter of common sense, the idea that the ballroom was secured, but someone could still get into the hotel, yes, that probably fits protocol and makes sense. But just thinking about it, says,
well, and we want to have you in just a sec. We've got live photos of the suspect's house in Torrance, California, and I do want you to look at this footage that's coming up and talk a little bit about what folks are looking for. But also to that point, and Jeff, you know this too, when you travel, and you do as well, I mean, you've been around these trips, when you travel with the president abroad, he stays at hotels. Other people can stay at those hotels. But that perimeter is pushed way out. You cannot get into that hotel without going through a mag, even if you are just a guest staying there. I've never seen that here. But when you're overseas, that is always the protocol, because it's a pain and you don't want to stay at that hotel because you don't want to go in and out. And I wonder if that's what we see if they do this again, is that perimeter is going to get pushed way out. Right.
And I think, I worked at the Department of Homeland Security for several years. I think we're constantly chasing the last vulnerability and the last problem. And I would think that the problem they fix now is, wait a second, people are getting too close to the President of the United States, and now we need to, whenever he's in a hotel, extend the perimeter a little bit more. It's tragic in many ways that it requires a vulnerability breach to fix the problem, but that's sort of what will happen next. I'm certain we're going to see something out of this.
I think your point is spot on. I mean, and that is absolutely true domestically as well when you're traveling with the president. If you're in San Francisco, if you're in New York, the hotel that you're staying at with, in our case, is often the press pool, is very frequently at the same hotel as the President of the United States. You can't get into the building without going through the magnetometer. So it raises the question about the security parameters at this hotel, not just last night, but in previous nights as well. And I think also worth explaining to people that the ballroom is on the very lowest level in the Hinckley Hilton, in the Washington Hilton. You have to go down, I think it's 3 floors. You have to go down 2 sets of staircases, or
it's at least 2 escalators.
Escalators is the word I was looking for.
I gotcha.
And so this gentleman, this person, would have had to go down that many levels with what reportedly was a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives. That, I don't know if he had it in a backpack or in some sort of a bag, but the fact, again, that he got as far as he did before he was apprehended is something that people are going to be asking questions.
I've got about a minute left here before the break, but I'm curious what the investigation looks like, both within that hotel, in that ballroom today, and also as we see these videos of Torrance, California, the house of the suspect. suspect. What law enforcement's doing there, and who indeed is in charge? Is it D.C. Police? Is it the FBI? Who's leading all of
I think that there's probably a task force working together. I would think the FBI is leading it, but again, I can't speak for how they're proceeding. You know, the evidence in the room is probably the least interesting evidence because you see it. It's either firearms or casings, anything like that. The interesting materials will be at his house and on his computers. We live in a world right now where everything is electronic. Receipts for purchases for those firearms, we're going to be looking for those. They'll be looking for statements, emails, text messages, none of which lie. There's a perpetual record of someone's communications with others, and those, at least in the world we live in today, are hugely important bits of evidence, and I know they're scouring for those at his house.